why that it's important to maintain and support the children's languages. And I might be, I'm sure, preaching to the choir here, but let's take it as a way to start building, in the connection among the different things that I want to share with you today. And definitely language is the core, and I was talking about this, the connection in between. If you don't have the language, you cannot access the culture. I was discussing that with my dear colleague here, Dr. Marlene Cepeda, gracias por venir, and who also have the privilege to work with for many years. When we were discussing about, all of these different aspects and how valid they are right now, and we need to keep the conversation going on these connections. Why? Because, and I want to connect this in between language and development of cultural and identities and children's self-concept, how they think about themselves. And if children perceive discrimination to the language they're speaking, they are not going to be connected with that. So some teachers, for example, when we prepare educators and we tell them, please support the children's first languages and a language other than English in the school setting, in the classroom. And I've heard many times teachers saying, well, Dina, I try to do that, but the children don't want to speak the language. I told them that they can speak Spanish or, whatever their non-English language is, but the children don't want to speak it in the classroom. So what is happening is here with you, let's reflect on that, is children make decisions. They have agency, right? And they can decide. Of course, if they perceive that there is discrimination, there is pain in speaking that, being connected with that language. Why am I going to be related to that? No, they decide to protect themselves and decide not to speak that language. So that's a very human and understandable decision. And so however, that comes with the pain of the loss, and that's going to be related to the future life and social, emotional well-being and mental health. So let me share another anecdote related to this. Fast forward, an adult cashier back in Texas. I saw his name. His name was Mario. And when I see someone that I could speak Spanish to, I always ask, do you speak Spanish, Mario? And he had been a very polite cashier. He was, working on my groceries, and then his face changed. He was serious all of a sudden and said, I don't speak Spanish. I speak German and Japanese. So I'm just making this up. He mentioned 2 languages. I don't need Spanish. There was so much pain in that comment. So much pain, right? And what happens? That's what we are doing to these children that will become those adults that then will have this trouble, this mental health. So we are not, and I don't think we have enough research, because we have tried, and with Marlene, we were talking about exploring more the connection between social-emotional well-being and learning English as a second language, or this, maintaining the languages, and we couldn't find the research. Because we are thinking as educators that we are concerned about the children learning to read and write, their school readiness, and let's teach them English. And again, as I said earlier, and they are going to be fine. Until we don't change in the field of education, we have to change our mindset and think about, again, the whole child and the children's well-being. And not because otherwise we don't know, but this is what is happening. some teachers say, oh, but they're speaking English, so learning English so fast. As soon as they start showing that they can speak English, we stop all the supports in the first language. But we are not thinking about the impact of these children losing their first language. And as you saw, the data indicate that by the second generation, or sometimes if you're lucky, third generation, there is a language shift. And our children are losing their first language and the connection that comes with it, right? With their culture and their identity, and having a positive identity and being proud and happy about who they are as human beings, right? Without having to hide anything. Language racialization. Unfortunately, language, continuing with this conversation, has been used as a tool for discrimination. Still is being used as a tool for discrimination. I was just mentioning what children do, right? And even though it's sometimes in the field of early childhood in particular, we haven't been discussing this much, definitely is linguistic racism is reflected in the policies. Language policies, decisions that are made in schools and early childhood programs about which languages to support. And that reflects an ideology about the role of language in the life of children and people in general, right? So the domination, the idea of that there should be just one language that is the dominant language, and we should eliminate and assimilate everybody into this, and is that in itself is a decision that reflects racism. And language, is as I said, unfortunately, it's not only a communication tool, but it's also the way in which we connect with our deeper self. And if we take away that, we are, really hurting the well-being of many people. So linguistic racism is reflected in the policies, and especially when we see that there are opportunities for access bilingual education are limited. That might not be the case in California, but let me talk about Texas. I lived in Texas for many years, for some years, not many, but some years, and had, of course, studied and explored, looked at the data there as well. So in Texas, what happened? There are programs for supporting English language learners. Texas is a state that until 2021 that I was there, about 49% of the children in public education were Spanish speakers or coming from Spanish-speaking households. And what are the supports that they received? 80% of children classified as English learners in Texas were in ESL programs, and only 20% had access to bilingual education that supports bilingualism and biliteracy. So different type of bilingual education. What did that reflect in terms of bilingual policies? And in the language policies or education policies in a state that has almost half of the population of children speaking a language other than English at home. ESL? Really? So that's what they have? We all know that ESL programs are only focusing on teaching English as a second language. There's no support to bilingualism in those programs. So that's our reality, right?